It's another edition of the Golazo podcast, so we take another dive into the world of Argentine football to discuss the latest news from Buenos Aires. Whether you're listening on YouTube, iTunes or SoundCloud, be sure to like, follow, subscribe or whatever it is that you can show us that you're out there. Welcome back to another Golazo podcast, and of course there is only one subject that we can possibly talk about, and that's been the case for about the last 5 or 6 weeks because of the delay, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Tom Robinson.
Hey Peter, how's it going? I'm glad to be here, finally talking about this Libertadores tie or not tie as it has been. It's kind of fitting of the occasion. This pod's been pushed back, just like the spectacle itself. So yeah, glad to be finally cracking on with it.
And it wouldn't be one of the world's biggest clásicos, one of the biggest derbies without Mr. Derby himself, Mr. Eli Mention from Copa 90, who's been out in Buenos Aires for all of the ups and downs, shall we say, of what's gone on. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I mean,
I'm buzzing to be on the show.
It's been an absolute age since we can go back to the first leg. I know you came out here, Ellie, to focus on it. We all naively, the world looked on at this glorious spectacle, and it hasn't really turned out like that. But if we cast our minds back a month for that first leg, you were excited as anyone. What was your first impression arriving in Buenos Aires and going to speak to the supporters ahead of that first leg?
I think, to be honest, I was actually not excited. It was a feeling I haven't had before. I'm not going to lie. When I was watching the semis, even the whole time in my mind, I was thinking, I don't actually want this to happen because this is almost like the series finale of your favorite TV show. That once this was decided, it was like, that's it. I'm all about derbies. This is the biggest derby, and this would be the biggest derby they can ever possibly be. So for me, I just thought, actually, I was kind of reluctant to even embrace it at first. I thought, I don't want this. I don't like closure. I'm the opposite of most people. I like leaving things open. Like, what if these two teams met in the final of the Copa Libertadores? So that was always I always preferred it as a pipe dream as opposed to reality. So at first I was thinking, I don't really want this to happen. And then I kind of got my wish granted a couple of times.
Well, I mean, even selfishness aside, I think a lot of people, even a lot of people were looking at it like, I'm not sure the country can cope with this final. And it's probably been proved absolutely correct. But with that first leg, I mean, you were there on the Saturday when the drama first started. What was that like initially going into La Bombonera in the driving rain? And what was the atmosphere? Were people even anticipating that this could not happen?
Look, I'm not going to lie. So much has happened in the last 2 weeks. Certain things have left my brain, so it's hard to recall everything. I'm editing at the moment. I'm just going back. I mean, it was just kind of like we built everything up. And because we don't live in Argentina, we didn't realize that much rain was... I mean, we didn't realize how intense it was intense, but we thought this was normal. We didn't realize it wasn't normal. So the whole time in my back, we heard I remember the first mention, we were still in the apartment and someone said it might be postponed. I thought, yeah, whatever, that's not going to happen. That doesn't happen. And then it just got more and more likely. So it was just like, okay, we had a camera broken in that rain, 2 phones, my phone and one of the assistant producers, our phones were broken. Shoes, clothes ruined. I mean, we really, we were just taken aback by how intense the weather was and just how much the Bombonera couldn't cope with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pitch which traditionally doesn't cope too well with rain. Yeah. So although it was unseasonable, the weather, I think unfortunately it's one of the problems in La Boca that it does get a bit underwater. But I guess in light of what has gone on since, the rain delay was relatively small fry. When you actually did get in on the Sunday and you did get to see a Superclasico, that must have been worthwhile in terms of that must have been what you were expecting from the event.
Yeah, it was. I mean, even we got into the stadium on the rained out day, and not only did it give me goosebumps, they actually kept. I started crying at one stage. I was that kind of overwhelmed by it all. It was, I said a lot, but that was what happened in the Bombonera. Both days was the best atmosphere I've ever seen. I can't recall that much noise. That feeling of like that there's that age old saying, the roof's going to come off. There's no roof, but if there was, I can't articulate what it was like the first time in the rain, because the stand opposite La Rosse behind the goals was completely packed, even in the pouring rain. Even after it had been announced it was cancelled, we went outside and people were staying in there just singing, dancing, singing the Gashina song. You'll see, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, and then quite a game as well.
I was going to say as well, Peter. Sorry to jump in, but like when La Boca and La Bombonera is like that, it really is hard to put into words, and I think that's what your Copa 90 videos do so well, is they bring that passion and that color and that atmosphere that words can't really do justice. I mean, I've been there for some big games. I was there for Martin Palermo's last ever game.
Wow.
And when it like kicks off like that, it's a sort of out of body experience. So I can only imagine what it was like there for the first leg, and a great game as well.
Yeah.
I think for all of the negative headlines as well that Argentine football has deservedly got via this final, it is a point where it's worth pointing out that watching football in this country is, for a football fan, like nothing else. And there are the negative things that come with it, but my God, when it goes off without any problems, it's something else. I mean, not obviously La Bombonera is a cathedral in that sense, a pilgrimage site for a football fan, but going to River, Independiente, Racing, in Rosario, so many of these places, is an experience which I think for any football fan around the world should experience at some point.
100%. Like you said, the good and the bad. It's one thing I know that's going to be a big part of it is like alcohol or religion or drugs. Too much of it is too much of a good and bad thing, and so therefore we really got the sense that, like, you know what? And I've really realized, I think I did a tweet about it, how like after this is my second extended period in Argentina, I've officially decided Argentinians are the craziest for football, but not because football means more to them, but more because when they get into something, they're so crazy for it. They can't do it on a sane level. So whilst Brazil football means maybe more, the Argentinian way of going about things just means they're crazier for it, if that makes sense. It's not that anyone's more. It's just that the way they seem to like live things, their passions, they only know one way, and that is to the extreme. And and whilst that can create what we saw in the Bombonera, the amazing scenes, the out-of-body experiences, as Tom mentioned, what it also creates is the negative sides of it. So it's that whole thing of, like I said, it's about like in anything, like in alcohol or drugs or religion or whatever else it is. It's like, for all the highs it can give you and the positives, it gives you the negatives. There's got to be a balance, and so when people try and find solutions, I'm like, I don't know what the solution is, mate, because that violence comes from the passion, and that passion might even come from the fear of violence. I don't even know. And obviously, the positive is, I mean, the negative should never be there. You'd wish it wasn't, because then it'd be the perfect experience. But how you solve something like that, I don't think you can. And if you do, you take away the atmospheres. I think that's not like the gospel truth. I just don't know how else you do it.
Well, I think it's a question which obviously has been asked a hell of a lot in the aftermath of what we'll get onto. But the truth is that it's not something which is an easy fix, and I think it would be naive to suggest that it is just something which lies just solely with supporters and says, okay, but there's this negative element within the supporters that we need to snuff out, and then everything will be perfect. Because I do think it does go a lot bigger than that. After that first leg, which left the ties so beautifully poised going into that second leg, we had that 2-week period in Buenos Aires where you were, I'm assuming, very busy doing interviews and speaking to fans of both clubs. What was the atmosphere what was the kind of anticipation heading into the second leg from both sides?
Well, yeah, as you said, I was very busy. You and me had a planned beer put back so many times. Our plan was to have the edit drop the day after the second leg. So we edited through those 2 weeks. Basically, during the day, we didn't leave our apartment unless it was to interview someone. So I unfortunately didn't get to see much of Buenos Aires. And what I got from people, which we kind of noted, was people, both sides of the affair, were happy with the first leg. The referee, the performance, no one had any issues. And we're kind of like blown away. No, we thought, so we tried to conduct as many interviews. We landed 2 days before. We conducted as many interviews as we could the day before the game to make sure we could get their different reactions after the game. But everyone was the same. Not one side was more confident or less confident. Both of them were like, yep, we're still going to win it. And so it was kind of interesting. No one complained about the ref. Everyone was happy. But what everyone did say, and Joel Richards, who we interviewed, for our master said was, it's the second leg we're worried about. That's where there's going to be trouble. We got a great quote from him where basically, he says, oh, it's the second leg, the gloves off, it's going to be carnage. Gloves off, gloves off. And we just thought, wow, okay, so it's all about it. And we didn't actually think it would happen. But then when you look back, we realize if you look back on the Copa Libertadores knockout stages, with this rivalry in particular, it's always the second leg where things kicked off, whether it was the infamous iconic moment happened, whether it was Palermo's celebration 3-0, where I think it was Ramon Diaz said if Palermo comes on the field, he'll bring on Francescoli, obviously then long retired. In 2004, in the second leg, you had Carlito Tevez do his little chicken dance. And then, of course, 2015, you've got the Gas Pimienta situation. So they all happened in the second leg. So and that's what everyone said, it's all about the second leg. And so we even do a link about it. You'll see on camera. I'm like, all right, the second leg. What's the second leg got in store for us? And then it actually happened, and we went, oh, okay, that wasn't a joke.
Yeah,
and I think you could see as well with the players, like there were so many players on yellow cards in that first game, and you could tell they were, like you said, their gloves were still on at that point.
Yeah,
I think it was only Santos Borré who got that yellow that rules him out of the second leg. But there was that sense that it's always setting up, and because there's no away goals as well, it's like a one-off final. And throughout, I mean, if anyone's listened to the WFI Libertadores pod, then you always know that it's injury time in the second leg, where everyone just goes demob happy and starts getting stuck in and getting involved, and that's when it all goes a bit crazy. So I wasn't too surprised that the first leg sort of went off nicely, and it kind of I think for viewers around the world, they were kind of like, oh hey, okay, the quality might not be the highest, but this was a really closely fought contest. There were some good moments, the atmosphere was incredible, and it kind of showed the best of Argentinian football, South American football. But yeah, I think for us who watch it probably too much, I think we could say, certainly for me and Peter, then we kind of always feared that storm was coming. The rain might have passed, but the storm was still a brewing.
Yeah, I think the first leg lulled a lot of people into a false sense of security, because they got, I mean, they got a 2-2 draw, which in of itself in a Superclasico was a bit out of character, because I think a lot of people thought, it's probably going to be a really shitty 0-0 or maybe a 1-0. So to get quite an exciting 2-2 draw, La Bombonera was bouncing. I mean, the world media that was broadcasting it probably got exactly what they wanted, even if it was 24 hours later. Building up to the second leg, that just kind of grew, really. We had that amazing training session at La Bombonera, which was kind of almost like the supporters packing out the stadium to wave the troops off to war. And River was building as well. You probably were there for that as well, Ellie.
Actually, no. At that stage, we were so deep into the edit, we sent the cameramen, but I actually didn't get to go, and I'm glad. I mean, our cameramen didn't have passes. One of them jumped a fence and recognized one of the Brazilian cameramen, and then he snuck him in. But they actually said it was kind of frightfully dangerous out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they did actually. Well, La Bombonera was closed afterwards by the city government.
Yeah, he said he can't believe there weren't people injured or worse, because he said he was blown away by it, just how bad it was. He said the stands were literally just absolutely packed, like sardines, and so no, we didn't make it out there. But I tell you what, it was something else. Seeing that stadium shake like that, it was something incredible.
Yeah, and of course the images of people clambering over fences, as you say, and with huge drops behind just to catch a glimpse of this training session, it kind of it added fuel to this game for around the world. People, fascinated by the passion that it generates, but it also gave a little sneaky glimpse into what could be coming, because I think we saw there a lack of security, a lack of policing. As you said, it was slightly dangerous. And then as we moved into the second leg on the Saturday, you were obviously one of the people trying to head into Monumental. Can you put into words or even describe what the hell happened when Boca's bus obviously infamously arrived at Monumental?
I actually can't, because I was in the stadium. Basically, I'll give you the lowdown on what happened with us. We walked in, we walked down the street, the bus got attacked. I even did a piece to camera saying, I can't believe how they've got this little security for a bus that's going down the street with all the fans in it. Then we just went into the stadium. FIFA heads and CONMEBOL heads walked right past us, surrounded by what must have been at least 20 massive bodyguards. Then we were capturing that, and then we were on the pitch. We were actually pitch side as the stadium filled. As obviously, you guys remember, beautiful sunny day. And I even said, because we were so far behind in the edit, what I would do for one more postponement, talking about the weather as the sun came out.
I remember you saying that to me, actually.
Did I say to you?
Yeah.
And I just thought in my head, like, come on, just give us one more give me one more day off and I'll be able to push this edit back, because we weren't ready. And I remember exactly, I actually got a text on WhatsApp. There was no internet, because obviously there are that many people. And the fans it was 90% full. And the fans were on their feet and they were starting to sing and dance. The mood was incredible. There was this Japanese TV crew. We got to start singing and dancing with them. It was amazing. And then I remember the exact moment I got the text from one of my producers who was on the ground outside. There's been an attack. And obviously, it's all Chinese whispers. So we were hearing the craziest rumors. Text stopped working because everyone was on their phone. And you just noticed this kind of like domino, like hush go around the stadium. Everyone started turning around, looking at the TVs and realizing what was going on. Then we got taken off the pitch because of security, and then we were behind the scenes. We'll leave that for you to see later. But basically, it was just a mess, an absolute mess.
Yeah, I mean, even just seeing it unfold on TV was like something from you wouldn't have been able to script it. I mean, the delays.
Yeah, we didn't know about any of that until later on. Genuinely, it was unbelievable. I didn't know about I'd seen little videos here and there, but I didn't know what. We just didn't know. We were, I've got a way of sneaking into things, so I got in a few hospitality boxes during the kind of limbo amongst all of it, and saw Pablo Perez in his eye. But I didn't. It was only until after we got out and got to internet that we saw what was going on. It was just, and there was some more unsavory scenes afterwards, and we were part of a riot, a stampede, arguably my most scary moment when everyone started. We don't know what happened. We heard bullets being shot, whether it's rubber bullets or something else, we don't know. But everyone started running back into the stadium.
Yeah.
And have you guys been to El Monumental?
Yeah.
You know where the big club badge is?
Yeah.
On the wall? Okay, so we were literally in front of that, walking slowly, right next to the police because we had cameras. And the next thing you know, you had this bang, bang, screaming. And then imagine just hundreds, if not thousands, running back into that kind of no man's land in between the stadium and so people were running back into the gates. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
totally.
And I haven't found any footage of this. I guess no one was filming at this stage. We had turned off our cameras. We actually had one in our hand, which came on afterwards. And I'm telling you, that many people rushed back into the stadium. Hundreds. I'm really talking hundreds and hundreds. We were against the wall. That big club badge obviously stood against the wall. And the people started pouring in. And then it honestly, after about 30 seconds, like at first it's tight, then it's really tight, then bodies are being crushed, and we started like going up the wall, like, and it was in your head, you're thinking obviously what happened in the past with crushes at football matches, and there was proper a moment where I thought, fucking hell, and women screaming, passing their children over. It dies down, relaxes, but obviously the cops are waiting for someone to try and attack them. It dies down, and then you hear it again, bang, bang, and it started again. And that's when everyone really started freaking out, like, okay, this is going to keep happening. Died down again. There wasn't a third time, thankfully, but by that stage, a lot of people were in tears. The hysterics, it wasn't nice.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, sounds pretty horrendous. And I think that brings up a really crucial point of just how poorly the police handled the situation. I mean, we don't want to just proportion blame to one group itself, because it's a multi-layered, nuanced situation, and you could definitely dish out blame to sort of at least 4 or 5 different groups probably in the whole scenario. But yeah, it was just criminally sort of haphazard and understaffed, and really questionable decisions made, which you're showing exactly on the ground. It was how it was as well. There was that lack of protection, not only for the Boca bus, but for the real fans that were inside the stadium, not the ones causing problems outside. So it's in a lot of ways it could. I mean, it was bad, but it could have been so much worse. The Boca bus driver passed out and the vice president had to grab the wheel. Like, if that bus had crashed, who knows, into other people or just leaving the players stranded, then it could have been really serious. So, as much as it's been a monumental farce, if you can pardon the pun, it's also it could have been a lot worse, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I know you need to get off and finish that edit now, Ellie. So cheers for coming on, sharing all your Superclasico experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Do you want to give it a quick plug?
So obviously, if anyone doesn't know, we've got a series on YouTube called Derby Days on Copa 90, COPA 90. We go all around the world covering the biggest derbies, and obviously we left this one. We left this one because we wanted to do the biggest one. We didn't know what that was until this obviously came around and stuff. And now, well, we got something that we've never captured before. It's going to be our biggest episode ever, and it's going to be. We really got something special. I don't think anyone really, at least in the English-speaking world, was on the ground for all 3 weeks, let alone covering it from the angles we did. People on the street, fans, journalists, media, even ex-players. So what we got is something pretty special, and if you've been following this story, give this a watch, because I think you'll enjoy it. We're pretty proud of it over here.
I've absolutely no doubt about that. So everyone, make sure you check it out. And thanks again, man.
Thanks, teams, man. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Tom. And guys, you've been great. Keep it up. We wouldn't have made this series out without some of your help. So thank you for that, and keep up the great coverage.
All right, man. Take it easy.
See you guys.
All
Bye.
Right. See you, man.
All right, well, cheers, Ellie. Obviously, it's great to be able to have someone who was in amongst it all, however dangerous and scary I'm sure it was. But Tom, I mean, there's a lot to actually get into surrounding the bus attack. It doesn't really, give it its value just to say, oh, the River bus was attacked and therefore the game was postponed. I mean, can you give some idea of what exactly, not exactly where the blame lies, because as you said to Ellie, I think it was, there was a lot going on there, but I mean, try and give it your breakdown if you could have, what happened.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, obviously on that one aspect, certainly the police and the security around the whole operation leaves a lot to be desired. But, I think the genuine sort of overarching idea that sort of came out after this was, these negative stereotypes that were just reinforced of the Latin American other, of the passion and the barbarism sort of overpowering the civilized element, and just kind of, and people certainly over back here in the UK, that that was their overarching sort of takeaway from it. But realistically, I don't think you can blame the fans per se, because as Ellie said, most of them, 90% of the stadium was full. They were all in there, and that sort of small proportion of fans in inverted commas of the Barra Brava, which is, over the years, you and I have both seen how that's sort of been a plague on Argentinian football. Everyone kind of thinks that's what gives Argentinian football its colour, and obviously there are some genuine fans within the Barras. I know a Barra from Estudiantes, and he's absolutely crazy for them, and he that's all he thinks about 24/7. But at the end of the day, they're not just a hooligan branch of the fan base. They're a racket. They're a mafia, basically. They're controlled in all kinds of sort of underhand elements of making money out of the club, and I think realistically that is something that's not new for Argentinian football, but it's neither is it just a purely Argentinian problem. We've seen stuff at Sporting Lisbon, we've seen stuff all around Europe and the wider footballing world. So for people just to kind of pin it on Argentinian fans' passion getting away with it, it doesn't really cover it, because it's not necessarily fans in the traditional sense, and it's not something that's unique to this country. Although as we saw, it wasn't even the first time that week that there'd been fan trouble.
No, exactly. Yeah, of course, there was a major problem at Atlanta's ground in the same week, which is obviously seen their ground, and now they're playing behind closed doors for the foreseeable future. But yeah, there is, I'm no doubting that there's a major problem in Argentina with the Barra Bravas, and it's come to light more than ever after this episode. Prior to the second leg, there was obviously the story that the police raided a member of the Barra's house, seizing something like 300 tickets for the second leg and several million pesos, which tied into the attack, and some people speculating that this was an attack, on purpose by the Barra to kind of hit back at the police. And then even just today or yesterday, we had more Barra stories with the sight of Rafa Teseo, one of the top guys at Boca, running security in front of the bus, and on the way to Ezeiza airport, and several others, it seems, travelling out for the second leg. And I think it would be naive to suggest that Barra from both sides are not going to be in Madrid on Sunday. So there is 100% an issue there. Obviously, there has been one guy arrested for smashing one of the windows of the bus this week.
He's been let out already, though, Peter.
Yeah,
he's out already.
So within 24
crazy.
Hours, he's out, and I think he had like a suspended sentence or something. I read them.
Exactly. It's like it took them longer just to identify him than he actually spent, in prison. I think he's got maybe like a 2-year ban and a bit of fine. It's ridiculous. And this is where, for me, the biggest blame lies. It's not, as much as you can, talk about fans, barras, police, it all feeds down from the same sort of structures that are in place in South American football. And I think CONMEBOL, for me, probably the ones who come away with, their reputation. Yeah, I mean, can it be any further in tatters? But these are the guys who permit this whole structure to exist. They're the ones who ultimately have the power to reform the system. I know it's maybe easier said than done, but these are the guys who let these barras profit from the clubs, and they were the ones who seemed to be pressuring both teams to play when clearly they were going to be in no state to play. Like when Borussia Dortmund's bus was attacked. When was it? A couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. No one would have dreamed to have said, "Yeah, let's let that game go ahead." I know it was slightly different circumstances, but still, these guys are the ones who should be able to change it. And with their the corruption and the money that they're taking, especially as I'm sure we'll get onto, moving this final to Europe, it makes me sick to the stomach. And let's not even, that's without even mentioning kind of how they neglect other elements of football, such as the women's game, the youth game, all that kind of stuff, that they have the potential to change this. And at the end of the day, their priorities are lining their own pockets and sort of being at the behest of marketing, and they're just some old dudes who are just out of touch with what needs to be done. So for me, if we are going to lay the blame at anyone's door, then CONMEBOL and the bigger structures around this whole scenario, they're the ones for me who should handle most of the blame.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out as well that from what I read, the guy that was arrested and, as you said, released, from what I read, wasn't even a member of the Barra. So it seems as though any sort of Barra involvement in any of what's gone on, certainly in terms of tickets or everything, again, has just been completely really whitewashed, even though it is this subject which is in the public eye, but nothing has happened. And I think that, yeah, you're right in terms of CONMEBOL are well aware of that, the clubs are well aware of that, and yet nobody really does anything to try and rectify the issue, because, as you say, I mean, there's a lot of people making a lot of money from it. And, the presidential system means that you kind of need to work with them if you're going to win a club presidency. So there's no doubt in my mind.
We saw what happened with Independiente and Cantero when he tried to oust them.
Exactly. And then what you have now is, there's no doubt in my mind that Independiente, for example, now under a new president, and the same now with Boca and River, however clean the presidents try and give off their image, you just have to look at who manages to get into their stadium week in, week out, and who ends up with tickets. How do they do that without the club having some knowledge at some level? So that, as you say, I think CONMEBOL, ultimately it's under their umbrella, it filters down into the clubs, but it's an element of the game which is really left to go on because of the money that's involved. Now, you obviously pointed out a hell of a lot of other problems with CONMEBOL, and I think people naively looked at CONMEBOL after sort of FIFA Gate and after the death of Grondona, and suggested that Argentinian football and South American football could be about to change in sort of a new era. But as of yet, I don't really think we've seen any real change, have we?
No, none at all. And I think, as we said, the choice to, I mean, the irony of taking the Libertadores to Spain, I mean, it's just, it's laughable, really, in terms of, it's just basically given everyone the sense of, this is like a massive lost opportunity. This no longer really is the final of the Libertadores for many people. The amount of people who've been turned off because of these actions by CONMEBOL, who, absolutely, I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, I know it would be a difficult scenario of trying to get this game played anywhere in South America. Like, there was talk of Paraguay, but realistically, they didn't have the infrastructure to deal with, the many fans who would just cross the border and sort of go to Asunción. Same, I saw people mentioning Montevideo purely in terms of geographical location. It would be the ideal kind of neutral venue in inverted commas. But if CONMEBOL wanted to, they should be playing this behind closed doors at River. I've joked about, even before the first leg happened, I joked with Simon Edwards on the W5 pod and about, oh yeah, Boca will probably end up winning this in an empty Monumental or something, and it could have ended up panning out that way. So realistically, I think I even saw that River, have they got 2 games behind closed doors for the next time they're in continental competition? I mean, it's just nothing. So I mean, the mind boggles, really. And I've probably just rambled in a fairly incoherent way about the many failings of CONMEBOL. But just to touch back on the thing you mentioned about the Barras, and was this a political striking back at the club or CONMEBOL? I just love how that with anything like this, it wouldn't be Argentina without the conspiracies. And I've heard from people who aren't even like massive Boca or River fans, but it just permeates through the culture so much that I heard one sort of nominally a River fan. She was saying, well, there's talk that Boca's allies within the police deliberately took them down Monroy, and then also they kind of prematurely sent Pablo Perez to the Otamendi hospital, where a doctor with links to Angelisi gave him the diagnosis and wouldn't let Commonwealth doctors evaluate him. So already that any kind of controversial incident is going to have all these amazing conspiracy theories, and who knows which one's true. But
I think
what I wanted to ask,
for me though, that's something which has kind of added to me getting put off of it, because I found it so frustrating that in the aftermath of something which we should all be able to agree on was dreadful, and instead people with close affiliations to either club seem more intent on trying to paint their club in particular as a completely innocent party. And okay, you can sit here and say, well, in this case Boca are innocent, but knowing Argentinian football, if it was the other way around, the club would be acting exactly the same way, saying, well, we can't possibly play now, and if we're not going to play, then we want the victory. River, on the other hand, saying things like you just mentioned, oh, well, Pablo Perez wasn't really injured, and they went to see a special doctor who, with links to the clubs, deliberately gave a false sting to say that he was injured. You just sort of think, well, hang on a second, it doesn't matter really. I mean, at the end of the day, what we all saw happen was the Boca team bus on the way to the stadium. And again, you can then say, oh, hang on, it was outside the cordon, it was not the club's fault, it was with security, fine. But wherever it happened, whatever went on behind the scenes, the Boca bus was attacked, windows were smashed, police gas, whatever, managed to get in and did affect the players. The images that beamed around the world was of Carlos Tevez and the players getting off the coach, choking, vomiting. It's just not a good thing, and you can't possibly look at that and say, oh well, hey, I think they were faking it a bit here, and I think we should play. And it's all just such a mess that it is one of the reasons why I think so many people are now looking at it going, you know what, the first leg was everything I wanted from this game, and this second leg is exactly what I thought might happen and what I didn't want to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, talking about the clubs themselves, as much as maybe other elements were to blame more, you can't say that the clubs haven't necessarily handled themselves in the best way either. As you mentioned there, there was a shred of solidarity sort of when the incident occurred, but then ever since then they've just been sort of passing the buck. And as you said, for me it was just the sense of both clubs just absolutely sort of paralyzed by the fear of losing, really. I think more than a lot of people have mentioned that it's a win at all cost mentality, but for me it's not. It's more, we can't be the guys who are seen to have lost the biggest ever Superclasico in the Libertadores final. That would just be that there's just no coming back from that. You'd be remembered for hundreds,
absolutely,
hundreds of years. So for me, in a way, in a kind of a weird, perverse, twisted way, the fact they both have an excuse, it means that they're sort of expunged of any, failings they might have on the pitch. They'll always be able to point to something. So whoever wins, that victory is always going to be stained and tainted. And for the losers, they're always going to have that get out of jail card. And I think the one of the best sort of phrases that I saw after the game to kind of summarize the whole situation was a headline from Ole. Not always a place where you get the best headlines, but in this case it was perdimos. We lost, and then it's saying how everyone lost. River lost the opportunity to play in front of their own fans. Boca have lost maybe morally in trying to win it under the table or in the office rather than on the pitch. And the country has lost due to the kind of negligence and incapability of police forces and violence of the Barra, and and above all, the fans have lost. They've taken away the enthusiasm and the enjoyment of witnessing a once in a lifetime final, and everyone's lost. That seems to be the feeling. I mean, what's the feeling like for you? Out there in Argentina.
No, absolutely that. And I think it's worth pointing out that prior to this was, when you say the country's lost, this is a game that the president, Mauricio Macri, okay, obviously he's not in a normal position for president as he was the former Boca president, but when he came out and was actually open to having away fans at the games and made a point of saying this is the opportunity for Argentina to show the world that it's progressed and that it's moved on. I mean, it couldn't be more of a disaster in terms of, in light of those comments of what's gone on and how the rest of the world views South American football. I mean, the Superclasico in itself is a big story worldwide, the two clubs meeting at this point, but with what's happened, that is the bigger story than the actual game itself, and that's what's, I think, so sad. So for me, and for I think a lot of people, not just here, but for people who are kind of more involved in Argentinian football week to week, they would look at it the same. And now, I'm not as interested as I should be. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not going to watch it, but how can you possibly be as excited about the game when it's happening in Madrid, in front of a vast majority of supporters who are just eagerly sitting in Europe? Oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to have the opportunity to watch the Copa Libertadores final, but really have no investment in it. There's just everything about it kind of stinks now, and that is what's such a shame, is that which has left this tournament. And I think we're in a position now where you do look at it and say, well, the clubs obviously want to win. It's the Libertadores, but what are they winning the same as how they would have done normally? Definitely not. We're in a position where at this stage the game is going to happen on Sunday in Madrid, but Boca have lodged an appeal still to say River should be disqualified. I think CONMEBOL have since, like today, rejected that appeal, but they're going to then take that to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And I think River then, have a sort of counterclaim. They have appealed anyway the fact that they didn't want the game to go to Madrid. They didn't feel they were at fault. Don't feel they should be fined $400,000. They don't feel that they should have the 2-match ban, or two games behind closed doors. So you're left with this mess, which isn't even going to finish with one of the teams lifting the trophy on Sunday. Whoever wins it is going to end up saying, yeah, well, we're going to appeal this, or you've won, but in the worst possible circumstances. So for all those reasons, it's difficult to look at Sunday's game in the way that we should be.
Yeah, definitely. It's just reinforced the overarching theme of this year's Copa Libertadores, which is that it was more about what happened off the field rather than on it. From just all the ineligible players, and even Rivers' behavior, or Gallardo's behavior in the semi-final against Gremio, and potentially breaking the rules there. It's just, in a way, it's fitting, but also it's kind of, the perfect example of the fact there's just something rotten at the core of CONMEBOL. And part of me thinks, this is almost the way it should end, but the other part of me is like, no, it shouldn't be this ridiculous. So it's a mixed emotions, because I love this tournament. It's one of my favorite tournaments in the world, and even though it's been memorable, it's kind of been memorable for the wrong reasons. But I think we should talk about the actual football. Let's preview this a little bit and get back to what's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we touched on the first leg there with Ellie, in that it finished in a pretty entertaining 2-2 draw, much to, I think, what most people would have predicted. Now, in that game, I think one of the more interesting aspects was the fact that Christian Pavón went off injured. So Boca were forced into a rejig and brought on Benedetto. Now, the delay in all of this has actually meant that Christian Pavón is fit again for the second leg. Looking at Boca, first of all, then, in that case, Tom, how do you see Guillermo Barros Schelotto approaching this second leg?
Well, I think that, obviously, as you mentioned, Pavón's fitness. I mean, I wonder if he's 100% fit, but certainly I think they'll try and give him a run out. I think it is important because he's so crucial to the way they play, and obviously with Vija on the other side of that front three, then that they really give Boca that width and directness that I think could worry the River fullbacks if they do, or depending whether they go 5 at the back or 4 at the back. I think that is a key area where the game could be won. So Pavon being available is going to be huge. Obviously, we need to see what state Perez is in. I suspect he'll be fine. I suspect he will get a yellow card at some point. But yeah, certainly the fact that they've had this time to recoup and get back together and give it a good go means that this is going to help Boca. No matter how much they cry foul play off the field, I'm sure that if they win, they won't be following up that complaint too hard. But having said that, I do think also River, even though they might not have the same strength in depth as Boca, I think as a team they function better. It's going to be interesting to see how they line up, and how the fact that Santos Borré is unavailable, and it looks like Scocco probably won't be available either. Mm-hmm. That's going to have a big impact on the way they go forward. They've shown they can shut out games, and they're defensively solid. And I think that's probably where Boca's main weakness lies is again their defensive side. And Olas is decent, but I don't think much of Jara and Izquierdos and Magajan. They're fine, but they've both got an error in them. So yeah, it's going to be. I think that River have the better manager and the better tactical setup, and they're going to be more flexible. And I would give them the edge. Although now they're not at home, who knows? Basically, I'm sitting on the fence here, Peter.
No, I mean, in my preview that I wrote for who scored, I went along similar lines as that. I think I do rate Queixada as the more tactically astute manager. I think he's able to work with what he's got in terms of coming up with a game plan to combat what he would see as Boca's strengths. And you mentioned possibly going with 5 at the back, and that's a realistic option. I think that especially with the Santos Borré and Scocco missing, most likely as you mentioned, leaving Lucas Prato as the sort of lone striker, that's certainly an option. With Boca, I think what you see is usually what you get in a Barros-Schelotto team. I think that Pavon possibly being fit is the only doubt in terms of, does he then go back to how he started the first leg with that 4-3-3, or does he keep how he finished the first leg with more of a 4-4-2? So I think that's the two options that you really have there with Boca, and I think in both cases Marcelo Queixada will know what to expect from both those two formations. I guess the only other difference with Boca could be the fact that, again, in that interim period, Esteban Andrade has come back to fitness and played. So even though Agustin Rossi had a very good first leg, you'd argue that Boca probably have their number one choice goalkeeper available for this game as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, Andrade has been a good, solid keeper for a long time, and obviously highly rated from when he was a youngster. But I feel so sorry for Rossi because he's not really done too much wrong, and especially he's been good in this tournament. So it feels weird to kind of maybe throw back a slightly rusty keeper into the mix for such a big game. So yeah, I think Boca's strength in depth is important. I mean, just think of the fact they've got Zarate, Benedetto. I mean, I don't want to give Tevez too much limelight because I feel like he's received too much interest from certainly the European media, who maybe see him as one of the more recognisable figures when he's not really the man of the people or even that good a player these days. But even someone with that much experience and certainly big game experience is going to be big. And it's weird because so much has gone on off the field. I feel like what goes on the field, I've kind of it's hard to get really excited about either one of these two teams. So it's before I kind of thought, Boca may be more of the underdog now after they've been attacked, but the way they've behaved and the way they've kind of just tried to weasel out of it, I just kind of think that's not really endeared me to them either. But then the other side of me thinks, well, should River have kind of rode their luck in terms of favourable decisions along the way, that it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm going to try and focus on the good stuff, like, you know, fantastic midfielders like Wilmar Barrios, who probably won't be too long for this league anymore. And obviously Ezequiel Palacios, who may well be getting a run out at a stadium that could well become his new home. So I think there's lots of intrigue on the pitch, and hopefully we get to see some good spectacle in terms of rescuing the reputation of this slightly stained tie now.
Yeah, and as you say, I think ultimately the Copa Libertadores is on the line, and the moment the two teams get out in the Bernabeu, then it's there to be won. So I think we're still going to get the same level of football. I mean, for all of Boca trying to say we should just win it without playing the leg, once they're forced into playing, you can absolutely bet that it's going to be nothing less than 100%. You know, and players like Wilmar Barrios, Pablo Perez will set the tone for Boca in that midfield. And I think from the off, we're going to see that very combative Boca midfield try and dictate. And I think it will be an interesting tactical battle. And that's probably why I would favour River slightly, just because I think when it breaks down into those moments of tactics, you'd favour Gallardo over Barros Schelotto. If you were to sort of look at that River side though as points of weakness, or if you were managing Boca to line up, what would you be looking at, Tom?
Well, yeah, I definitely think, as I alluded to earlier, was both the fullbacks, I think, are probably an area that Boca can get at, because Carco is, you know, he's long past his best, and Montiel, as well as he's done as a right back, I don't think he's really a natural right back. So the fact that those two are your kind of wide outlets coming up from defence, and often when you see, even when River are playing with two nominal wingers, even if it's Pity Martinez and Quintero, they're guys who cut in anyway. So when a lot of emphasis is placed on the width that those fullbacks can provide, and seeing as they're not up to too much attacking or defensively, then I think that is somewhere that I've been surprised that they maybe haven't been found out sooner. I think some of the Brazilian sides paid them a bit too much respect in that, and I definitely thought after the first leg that Boca would kind of use the width they do have to try and target that. But having said that, you know, we mentioned how good defensively they were, and I think what's going to be interesting now is, you know, we've seen in sort of Superclásicos over the last couple of years that they've actually been more entertaining affairs than what we're used to for maybe 3 or 4 years before that, and how a lot of the time it seemed to be the away side that picked up the momentum and maybe had that less fear of losing. So the fact it's now in this neutral venue is going to be interesting to see how that influences the mentality of both sides, because the way it's set up from the first leg it's basically a one-off final now. So it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be tight, and yeah, it's going to be hard to do to really pick out an obvious favourite. I think there's so much going on around that yeah, it's always going to be slightly seen through that lens of what has happened off the pitch, and it's not really going to be remembered for what happens unless we're treated to an absolute classic. You know, if they get something as good as the Birmingham derby or the North London derby, then we're in for a treat. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, and certainly also maybe for the future of both managers as well. You know, we've seen Barros Schelotto linked to the Atlanta job, and Gallardo seems to, if he wins this, then you kind of think, well, he's done almost everything he can at River. So it's a really pivotal moment for both clubs, I think, in terms of going forward, as well as just the event itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be a very interesting an interesting few days to come up in Madrid. As at this moment, there's obviously been no incident, so hopefully it passes without any further bad news. But yeah, I think on the wider picture, it is going to be interesting. I think both. Well, I think Barros Schelotto, win or lose, probably will be coming to an end. His time at Boca. The MLS seems to be the most likely destination, even if it's not Atlanta. And I think, Guijardo hasn't come out and said that he would be going, but I think you're right. If he was to win it, you'd question whether what more motivation would he have to remain at River, really, when I think he'd really be putting himself in the shop window for a number of top jobs in Europe. And I think that probably helps highlight maybe what we were suggesting in terms of the two managers. Then we're here talking about maybe one going to MLS and the other going to Europe, in terms of the difference in quality. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I think it's weird in a way because I think Barros Schelotto's he's done well at Boca and he's someone who's synonymous with the club and synonymous with winning things at the club, but he does just seem to not be quite regarded in the same light and not quite have that same tactical nous as Guijardo, who genuinely looks like someone who could go on and do big things in Europe. Part of me always thought that Guijardo was kind of almost waiting till he had the requisite experience in Argentina to be able to go into a top job in maybe La Liga or Italy. We saw Jorge Almiron try to go over to Las Palmas, and even Barros Schelotto, he was almost at Palermo, wasn't he? So
I think he was for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, before they kind of said, oh, actually, you don't have enough experience. So there's always been part of me thinking, what, Guijardo's just making sure he's got the 5 years before he jumps across the Atlantic and gives it a crack over there. And I think it's turned out to be a really good move because he's become one of River's most successful managers, and I genuinely think he's up there with someone who will one day go on and manage the national team. But for now, our boy Escaloni, who's almost like the spirit animal of this podcast, is still hanging on.
yeah, of course. Yeah, he was recently announced since we did our last podcast as the permanent manager. We won't get into that now, but it's certainly one for us next time we do this, Tom. I'm sure we'll revisit that. So as we clock on to about an hour, we'll call it there. Any last words or wishes for Sunday?
Well, let's just, hope that it all goes off without any drama, and then hopefully that nothing that we've said here has been made irrelevant or defunct by the time it comes out. Hopefully we can see the good side of Argentinian and South American football after all that's gone on. So that's my hope, that football is the winner.
Lovely. I think that's a good way to end it. I mean, part of me is just saying, let's just get this Libertadores over with. We can move on, and
exactly.
Obviously, next year we won't have the 2 legs. We're going to have the 1 leg in Santiago. Hopefully, Santiago isn't going to have to contend with a Superclasico coming to their city. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But as always, thanks a million for giving us your time and your views, Tom.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I always enjoy it. And it was great to hear from both yourself and also Ellie as well. I'm really looking forward to that documentary from the Copa 90 boys. I think I can speak for both of us on that. And enjoyed it as always.
Lovely. All right. Well, I'll speak to you soon. Yeah, nice mention there of the documentary. I'm sure it'll do slightly better numbers than this. But hopefully they'll give us a few crossover listens. But thanks to Ellie, who obviously isn't on the call anymore. But cheers and thanks for listening. And hopefully we'll do it again in the not too distant future. Thanks for listening as ever. Follow or subscribe to keep up to date when the next episode is available, or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. All the details are in the information below. Feel free to leave us a comment on any of the mentioned platforms, whether you have questions or requests, and we will try and get back to you. Thanks again, and we will speak again soon.